mining later. This small mechanized mine was very interesting because even the overburden contained enough gemstones to be worth processing to remove the valuable gem material. Usually not the case in Sri Lanka. Usually you have to get down to the actual elam or gem-bearing gravel before you start processing. Now this particular mine really shows the effect of water. In many of the places we went to, the water had to be pumped out from prior rains. And even though this is a large open pit mining operation by Sri Lankan standards, they had been pumping water out for 7 days. And the water had filled it up enough to make mining impossible. So water in mining is critical, both the process, the ore, and also filling up the mines to stop mining. So water is necessary, but yet water can also be preventive in mining when the rains come. And you can see the pumping out of the water here continually going on. There was no mining when we were there at this particular pit operation because of the rains that had come before us. So the miners were just waiting to get that water out. Again, moving along, constantly moving by dirt road to see other mining operations. In this area, we saw a combination of traditional pit, hand operation, and later mechanized operation. Watch them remove this gravel by bucket. Some of the operations were almost overrun by vegetation, even though the mining was going on. Always putting the mud and the gravel in buckets and then working as a team to move it in the piles. This is the classic Sri Lankan way of removing gravel and overburden like mud after the rains. This particular mine was a very shallow pit operation where they had begun to dig some shallow galleries. This was all being done by hand operation. These two gentlemen were very proud of their pit mine. Again, another very shallow operation, and nothing but hand tools to dig into these pits and remove the overburden, hoping to get down to the gem-rich gravel. See some of the hand tools that they were using and the classic basket with the gravels. Their processing was a bit more on the simpler side. They had some mechanical rocker boxes, but they were primarily using, at the time of our visit, hand rocker boxes, dry screens, to whereas they would shake the gravel to remove a lot of the overburden without the use of water. Then they would sift through the rocks and try and find sapphire crystals. After sifting through it, they would just dump the material that was left into a pile. This might later be washed in another area to try and find any sapphire crystals that were left over. Right next to this hand-operated mine was a small mechanized mining operation. Like at the other mechanized mining operation we saw, it utilized a backhoe to remove the material, to reach the gem-bearing gravels, and then remove the gem-bearing gravels, load it up into a truck, to be taken to a sluice where water cannons were being used to wash the material through a grating and onto the sluice, where it would go through to hopefully trap the sapphire crystals in the rifling of the sluice. These sluices were originated in Australia and have been adapted for gem mining throughout the world. Constant flow of water. The flow has to be just right, the speed of it, so that you trap the sapphire crystals in the rifling of the sluice. We had a full day in Balagoda traveling on to different mining operations that we saw. In Balagoda, like in Ratnapura, we saw the classic Sri Lankan pit operations. In this particular one also, they had been fighting to remove the rainwater and now had resumed mining. Loading the material up in the baskets and then tossing it up to the top. This is just constantly hard work in the mud. Notice they're in bare feet, shorts, it's hot. Really makes you appreciate the sapphire crystals that come out of Sri Lanka. And of course the hose, so they can continually pump the water out so they can get to the gem-bearing gravel. You have the rainwater, you have groundwater that can seep in. You can see these two pits are right next to each other. This is very common to have several of these vertical shaft pits very close to each other, with the overburden being brought out and the gem gravels being brought out and piled up near each other. All working together, usually on a farm that is the property owner. In Sri Lanka, you commonly have mining operations with partnerships that include the landowner, usually a farm owner, the person with the mineral rights, the person that supplies the water pump, and the miners themselves. Now we're traveling to another location that was a real treat. A classic Sri Lankan river mining operation. The river miners work in an area of the river where the water slows down, more likely for the gem gravels to be deposited, and also create their own dams and even rock filtering system to help trap these gem gravels. Now you can see them using these wooden poles with a metal blade attached to them. They're removing rocks that get into the way, and they're dragging up the gem gravels that the water has already partially washed, and they will further wash and pick through to find the sapphire crystals and other alluvial gem crystals. Look at this team effort with this group of men to remove some of the heavier rock areas, and the man standing in the water to guide the metal blade as they drag across the river bottom. The basket always in the background, ready for the material to be loaded in it. This was really a treat to see this operation. And to watch these men load up heavier rocks that are getting in the way that might be moved and used to help dam up an area of the river, to help slow the water down. Really back-breaking work with some of these rocks that are being constantly removed so that they can get the underneath area and the gem gravels. This was great to see all of these men now working at once with these wooden poles with the metal blades to scrape the river bottom and go after these gem gravels once the heavier rocks were removed. We watched this for hours to see this operation. An operation like this that has gone on for decades, for centuries. Really interesting operation to see men working in harmony with nature, nature doing part of the work for them, but still requiring heavy manual labor. This was right next to a tea plantation, which was also fantastic because you have another famous product from Sri Lanka, the tea. Famous like the Sri Lankan sapphires. Both right next to each other and both operating in harmony with each other. Whatever these miners do to the river, they will restore afterward the river back to the condition that it was. This is true of mining in general in Sri Lanka and insisted upon by the Sri Lankans, working in harmony with nature. And then moving back on the road, moving to other mining areas and other markets in Sri Lanka. We were constantly on the move to see as much as we could in the short period of time we had.